Hello, everybody. It is May 22nd. It is about 7 p.m. Central Time, Americana. This is the American Micro Podcast, Militia to Gun Violence episode. I'm just one of the co-hosts. None of us are the main hosts. That's not the way this works. We've got Rodney and we've got Julie today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. I'm from Oklahoma City. I'm in Oklahoma City. I'm your Native American / white host. We were talking about that kind of stuff earlier about our ethnicities. Rodney, you want to go ahead and chime in?
Yeah, I'm in Baltimore. Been here for about 2.5 years. Moved here from San Diego for a lot of reasons. And I met Pago in California about, 15, 16 years ago, something like that. And we are embarking on this this journey cast because it's something that we need to allow people to hear when it comes to just, the plain facts and conversation about things American. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
And then we've got a third, a new third, and so Julie, you mentioned that this might not be the first and last time. You might be willing to come on more, right? So tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, I'm actually born and bred in Melbourne, Australia, down under, as a lot of people know us as, and a lot of people call Melbourneites the Mexicans because we're like in the south. So I happily take that tag. It's really good, and we're a very continental city. We have a lot of a bit of a melting pot of people here, and I'm really proud of my city. I think we're really very easygoing, generally pretty open-minded people. If you compare us to other cultural cities, I guess. And we have rivals, which is Sydney usually. So Sydney and Melbourne are it's like LA and New York kind of rivalry.
Okay.
So.
Mm-hmm. And then, okay, so you said multicultural mixing pot. That's kind of the way I think about like Oklahoma, and America likes to think of itself as a melting pot. Is your city like the most melting pot out of all of them?
It's an interesting question. I think. Each city around Australia has a bit of a melting pot, but probably more, I would say more so in Melbourne. I think a lot of the northern states have a lot of Indigenous, like Darwin and up north, at the top of Australia, and Queensland as well, which is a very tropical kind of state, similar to the temperature of Florida. Like it's kind of got the same sort of weather. Yeah, sort of very tropical and a lot more isolated in some areas, and Western Australia, which has a lot of desert, except the coastal areas, which is Perth. But I would say Melbourne and Sydney pretty much are very, very much a melting pot. I think the further north you go, there might be pockets of racism. I'm not saying racism doesn't exist in Melbourne, it does, but I can't really comment because I haven't experienced racism, obviously. But, according to some of my friends, they'd much prefer Melbourne to, say, Queensland, in terms of racism. And, I did see some incidences of that in, Queensland when I was on the bus, or, you just hear people making comments towards other people, which I really don't like at all, and I'm always the first to stand up. But yeah, pretty much Melbourne.
I'm curious. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's all right. There's a bit of a delay, so sorry about that.
Mm-hmm. That's okay. I'm curious. I want to just like delve into some very serious questions because we're talking about. We'll get into militia in a second, but I'm curious about kind of you were touching base on a little bit of the racism that exists in Australia, and we have some here, of course, in the South, in Oklahoma. It's very like historically documented. I was gonna say like it's kind of the most well-known forms of racism globally in at least media anyway.
As Dave Chappelle would say, Mwah.
So it's kind of
It's
like
the best
there's like this
racism on
trope.
the planet, dude.
There's this trope of like a bunch of white guys on the back of a pickup truck with like guns chasing down like a poor black guy who's like been accused of something he's not guilty of. Is there kind of a trope like that in Australia? Do they have like any of these
There
tropes
is.
like that? I know guns.
There is a group of, I would say, white supremacists in Melbourne that actually went to a country town in Victoria, which is the state I'm from, and they were terrorising people and tourists, and they were very racist. I can't remember. I think there was something called Proud Boys or something. I don't know if that's the name of them. Can't remember off the top of my head, but they're like obviously a white racist group. And
Well,
they
so
had to
Proud
go.
Boys are a big group right now, prevalently. Are they kind of new? Did they show up like 5 years ago or something like that?
Yeah, pretty much when Trump came in, I think.
Yep.
That's when
Yep.
things started to ramp up here. And I'm like,
Yep.
I don't want us to go down the same road as America because, they were dealt with, though. I think, there still needs to be a lot more done. I think, there still needs to be acknowledgement that these are dangerous groups and, we don't want them here. And nobody wanted them because this place in the Grampians, it's like a mountainous area and it's country, more sort of further out. And it took them to go there in order to protest. You know what I mean? Like picking on
Mhm.
those country people, and the country people just couldn't stand them, because they were disrupting the town. They were disrupting tourists, being racist towards tourists, and, the police shut them down. So thank God for that. But yeah, there is a bit of a concern in Australia. And of course, there was the shooting in New Zealand of that massacre that happened of white supremacists that went around. So we don't want that here in Australia. Like, the majority, I think, really don't want that kind of violence here. Because we enjoy a lifestyle here where we don't have to worry about gun violence to the degree that you guys do. It's like it's sporadic here.
Julie,
It's not since
Julie,
our Port Arthur massacre, which has happened in the 90s.
That's what I was going to ask you
and
about.
the gun,
Yep.
yeah, the gun control has been much really, really helpful in terms of getting the murder rate down and the suicide rate down.
How did the gun
Yeah.
control happen? How did they legislate the gun control? What did they do exactly?
Do you mean
after
okay.
that?
So
No.
after
How did your politicians after that?
Well, the biggest
No, go
surprise was it was actually a conservative politician that enforced the tighter gun controls, which I was really surprised about. And thank God for that. Like I'm not generally a supporter of the Conservative Party, but he did that one good thing. And they did a buyback scheme of guns, like semi-automatic weapons and pump-action shotguns and things like that. And I think about 20% they got back on that buyback scheme because they gave them an incentive. You give your gun, we will pay you something, for the gun. So, and the guns got destroyed and things like that. And now, there's a waiting period for a gun license and various things like that. So, there's a lot of stricter gun controls compared to America. It's like even kids 14 years of age can't get a gun unless it's for a sport like target shooting or, like the Olympics or something like that. And it has to be justified. It can't be just for self-defense. We don't have guns for self-defense. So
what would justification look like? Would it look like somebody's actively like hunting you down, like, and you can show it through courts? Somebody's like kicking down your door, occasionally or something, or what's a justification?
There's no stand your ground laws here.
Yeah. So what is the justification in Australia?
Yeah, that's the only thing that I really find a bit difficult is there should be a lot harder on criminals in that respect because there is home invasions here that it does happen. And they do use guns sometimes. But if you compare like mass shootings, we don't have mass shootings to the degree, like it might be sporadic. It might happen once every, a few years or something, we have a gun mass shooting or something, but it's very rare, like here.
Every few years. That's ridiculous. Okay, so I think we need to back up a little bit, and I'll ask you, Julie. Did you guys? This happened in the '90s, like your transition from like kind of the free for all with guns to like let's control it a little bit. But let's go back. Let's reverse. Did you guys have militias in kind of the origin story of the building of your nation to protect homelands and stuff?
I don't know if it's so much militias as such. I think it's more like we had outlaws, and a lot of our early settlers were like from Britain, Ireland, Scotland, and places like that, and a lot of them were convicts because they if they stole a loaf of bread, they were sent out here to Australia for something, a small infraction, and they were given labor, and then they had to earn their freedom, so to speak. And a lot of the Irish, I think, and Scottish were very resentful of British powers that be, so they became outlaws, a lot of them. There was a lot of racism towards Aboriginals, I'm going to be honest about that. And it's still ongoing today. But there has been some inroads, where that's concerned. Like there was an apology made to the Aboriginals officially by our Australian government, which is not very common with a lot of governments that have, had slavery, I guess. And, there is some movement towards, uplifting Aboriginal culture. But I don't know of any kind of militia. There was a White Australia policy up until I think it was the 1950s. So, which is ironic because when you look at our history, there was a lot of Black Americans that came out to Australia during the gold rush. There was Chinese, there was all Hispanic, there was different backgrounds coming out back then. But then there came this White Australia policy for a certain period of time up until the 50s. And then the European migration happened. Then in the 60s, it was the Vietnamese and Asian migration. Then it was, I think, the African migration. So each culture has faced a level of racism, I guess, coming to this country. They all go through it. But eventually down the track, they become a part of the culture and that's where we are today. But I don't feel that there's been militias in the degree that you've had it, like doomsday preppers type militias that you have there to that degree. Not that I
here's the thing.
Maybe I'm unaware.
Here's the thing. So, okay, if we're going to talk, okay, so militias. So, I mean, I want to get into it. So,
yeah,
when we talk about American gun violence, okay, it's really complex. So, if you're looking at Australia versus America, remember when we were talking, it's an island versus borders where guns can come through, and of course, the guns that we send to Mexico are guns that come from from different parts of the world. How does a Kalashnikov get into the United States? They're not, you know what I mean? So the bottom line is, if you look at the historical context of militias, I would say worldwide, they literally probably everything pretty much in the last 400 or 500 years dates back to who we are and what we've become as a nation. Okay. So that being said, the concept of militias has like extremely deep roots in America. And of course, that's dating back to the country's, to the founding of the country, right? The Second Amendment.
Well, the founding of the country and the amendments came later, obviously, after the Constitution. But I'm with you on the need to kind of explain a little bit of
the amendment to the United States Constitution. The Second Amendment was ratified in 1791. Okay, it was
Yeah.
like it was enshrined. Uh, it was for people like you and I, and if Julie was here too, we could bear arms. The whole well-regulated militia thing. So, and we're talking about people who needed to make sure that a tyrannical government didn't try to to deal or just take over and squash their rights.
Well, okay. So I'm gonna pause you there
So I
for a
mean,
second. This is a pretty common. This
go
is
for it.
the most common conversation about the 2A is that the gun advocates and I like. Okay, so let's be clear. I'm a gun owner, Rodney. You're a gun owner, right? Is that right?
No, no, no,
Are you
no,
a gun
no.
owner,
I won't
Rodney?
have.
You're not. You're
Okay,
not.
let me.
Okay.
No, no. Okay, hold on. Hold on 1 second. So let me explain.
Oh, you
And you
you are
know this too.
trained.
Look,
You are
I'm
trained with guns, and you've used them. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, I was in the Marine Corps 6 years. I've fired a lot of weapons, gone to a lot of schools. I was a gun team leader. Been in some places that you use weapons. Yeah. So I mean, looking at just where we've come from as a country with militias to through the Wild West or just wars in general, wars, the Wild West, the remember you and I were talking about African Americans not being able to have guns, and that was gun
This is where
control.
I was headed. This is
Like
where I'm. This is where I was
yeah,
headed.
yeah, yeah.
Like the idea of militias. The idea of militias is a little convoluted. It's a little bit of a so there's a we always sneak in a little bit of like a history about white supremacy into every single one of our episodes, and it's not because we want to focus on it. It's not because we love talking about white supremacy. It's just that it's pervasive throughout our nation's history, and so
Well, but
so
that's what you brought
militias.
up though. Remember?
Yeah, no, I remember. So what I was going to mention was militias.
Okay.
So okay, if we're going to go back to the origin of like 2A and militias as it's written about in the Constitution or in the amendments, militias
Mm-hmm.
actually were fairly well like funded and armed by the federal by the
Yes.
federal entities by the government, and there wasn't much of a need to actually like rebuild or sustain the idea of state militias. And in fact, the state militias were typically the building it into the 2A is thought to be by some people, usually people of color, experts, historians of people of color, thought to be a concession from the federal government to the southern states, saying, "Hey, we know you're going to need to deal with racism, so we're going to give you the power to have guns and execute the rules because there are state by state rules. You can make as a state laws to decide who can have guns, what type of guns, what type of ammo, what type of like amendments like armatures or whatever you call them, like the different types of like the way the types of guns you can buy and how they're built up and stuff, the laws that dictate what you can buy, can go state by state, but 2A is thought to be a little bit of a give to the racist southern kind of mentality so that they wouldn't fight so hard against reconjoining with the federal, like the rejoining like all of the states. So there's a little bit of that we have to acknowledge that is in some people's minds. I'm not saying that's blanket true, but I'm saying some people believe that. So we have to acknowledge that first.
Yeah. Culturally, I would say, culturally, I would say. I mean, and this is just from what I look from what I've read, and from what all the things that I've just researched. Um, if you're looking at the beginning of this country, literally in the 1600s, when
You mean
it was
the
more of a
Anglo
wide
beginning of
open.
this country?
Well. I'm just saying it was a little bit more of a, yeah, that being very true. It was more there was there was the 1619 Project when slaves came over, but then there were still
Right.
free African American people in the country. In the early to mid 1700s, all that went away. Okay, up until the point of the ratification of the Constitution, or 2A as you call it, in 1791. Now, in 1808, once slavery was full blown, and it was, although it had been 1808, they stopped cargo from Africa. They stopped the transatlantic, but transatlantic slavery. They stopped that. They outlawed the shipment of slaves to America. But there were far more. I think there were like 3 to 4 million slaves in America at that point, and there was no way that a white plantation owner or anyone white would want an African American man or woman to have a weapon, because their work risings
Okay.
where
Okay, so we're
go ahead.
Yeah, we're getting into that point of history where we're talking about. So there was actually like the American Revolution between the British and I'm sure you have some dealings with the British in your history as well, too, Julie, right? Like they were kind of a warfaring type nation, right?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, they caused a lot of issues with Indigenous people. Obviously, have been massacred. We have our fair share, just like any other country. I think some of the difference is that a lot of our country has been built on convicts. Basically, if you look at our early history, because going back to the 1700s. When white settlers first came here, and there was some Portuguese and Dutch before that. There is some evidence saying that they'd come through past Australia. So, Captain Cook may not have actually discovered Australia officially, maybe, but not, there's been other cultures that have come here. But, basically most of our country was actually based on convicts. Sorry,
right.
What was that?
Rodney?
Sorry, did you say something, Rodney?
No, I was going to say other seafaring nations came through Australia for sure. Yeah.
Which there's kind of like weird micro histories, like the Vikings came into America. We suspect that there was some Viking history into America before the European the other Europeans came in. Yeah. So I'm gonna back up and go. So we were talking about the American Revolution. There was the British, and they were fighting what would become the Patriots for America, and that included Black people here in the Northeast. And what happened was there were like thousands of British against like typically thousands of like Northeastern Patriots. And that's because there were Black people that were armed and fighting them. And so they kicked the British butts. And the British started moving their way down south to what they called the underbelly of the nation, into the southern states, because it was less populated. It was more like sparse, less protected than the Northeast, less settled. And they knew they had a better chance. And they did, because the South refused to arm their Black people. And so when they got down there, they would find like 500 white guys armed and ready to fight like 1,000 to 2,000 British guys. And the British guys were having a really good time. George Washington, a few of the Washington, D.C. political figureheads sent messages and people down into the South and told them, you need to arm your Black guys to help you shore up like the defenses, to help, defeat the British. And they just like lost their minds, saying, we just simply refuse to arm our Black individuals. Of course. So this was a big deal. They eventually they decided to allow some of particularly people from the north to come down and help them, but they armed some people, and there was a little bit of some warring going on, and we eventually gained our freedom, so to speak. And then whenever the war was won, they sent troops. They asked America, like the Federals, to help them disarm any of the blacks who helped them fight against the British. So there were now newly really well trained black individuals in the South who helped fight some of the British during these wars, and they wouldn't stand for that either. So they had like what would kind of be the original like police forces where you're afraid of a black guy with a gun. They just ran across the South and destroyed anybody who looked like they were going to be threatening with kind of a gun. So this is like kind of the beginning of the protections of kind of our militia, and the idea, the foundation of like, now this happened before then, like who gets land, who gets like voting rights. It's a white guy who owns land, and that's kind of the origin of like so what was there was
the patriarchal white
right.
nationalist Christian agenda. That's what
I can't remember the law, but there was a law that was passed, and they said everybody from like 25 to 45, or maybe it's 18 to 25, has to take up arms if they're of like able-bodied white male, landowning. They have to like take up arms and defend the nation. This began the mythology, the American mythology of like guns equal freedom, that white male plus guns is Americana. Wave that flag, bravado. That's the beginning of that thing, and
well, look,
it hasn't
here's
stopped.
The thing: if like if you for instance, if you are in a situation, better yet, if I'm in a situation where I'm carrying a weapon across country, let's just say I buy it here, I guarantee you, I'm going to have issues if I'm going across country and I get stopped, and the police officer, says, "Do you have weapons?" And I say, "Yes, I do." And they're in the back, and yes, it's going to be a situation for just about anyone who's African American or BIPOC, a person of color. But that being said, if we get into, I mean, I know where you're going with the history, but all I'm saying is, post Civil War, post what's the word I'm looking for? In the 1870s, 1880s, then better yet, the Jim Crow era of America.
No, you were right on the money with like the Dawes Act and the Homestead Act. Like that's the 1860s, 1880s.
Yeah,
that's when all of that stuff started.
Yeah, You're not owning a gun if you're 18. What if you're from 1870 to literally 1965? You're not gonna dude. It's just not gonna happen. And like you said, what did you say about your enemy? Remember that
well, there's this constant pervasive.
What was that?
Well, are you talking about where? Okay, it's not just an American ideal. It's like a kind of a historical, like an art of war type of thing, where if you have like a lesser enemy, somebody who's not your biggest enemy, it's advantageous to temporarily put them in between you and your bigger enemy. So you pretend like they're your friend. Like you're like, okay, for now you're with us, and you just put them right between you and the bigger enemy. So like it would be the super white Europeans, like the racist kind, who put like the Irish, because remember the Irish weren't considered white at the time, but they would make them the home builders and put them in the impoverished sections between them and like the Native Americans or the black people. So they would give a buffer zone. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, okay, so there was a rebellion of indentured servants and slaves that happened, and let me see if I can find it. Well, anyways, the bottom. Let me see. Hold on. Let me see. It was called. hold on. I can't find it. Anyways, there was a huge rebellion that went on, that happened, and the late 1600s, the late 1670s, 80s. That's when, because before then you weren't white or black. There was no such thing as white or black.
Right.
It was a construct built on a way to divide people, and that's exactly what it's done for the last 350, 400 years. It's divide people based on the color of one's skin. And like you said, we take an enemy, give him a gun, make him our friend, because he's got white skin, but he's not exactly blue blood. You know what I mean? And now we're here, and that's when we get into of what's been going on for the last 100 years.
So I'm curious about
in America.
We've kind of like railroaded Julie. Sorry, not jewelry. Julie. And I want to hear like an outsider's perspective on what you've heard or seen happening through the growth of gun violence, because it's certainly changed. I feel like it's gotten worse. I think the stats back that up. It bears out, like more guns have been sold. The reporting and the actual violence is increasing as far as like school shootings and stuff. Crime is not necessarily up in certain places, so there's kind of a false narrative on like crime getting worse everywhere in the United States, but certain types of crime are getting worse, like these school shootings and things like that. So, Julie, what are you hearing? What do you see? What is your perspective on American gun violence and history as far as what we're talking about?
Well,
real quick before you answer that, for people that you know, I'm going to piggyback on top of that. For people that you know, what when you talk to your friends, because you've been here, you've been to LA, you were in LA, like just a year ago. When you talk to your friends,
that was two and a half years ago.
Yeah, 2.5 years ago. But from what you saw, and just the pervasiveness of like the culture, when you came back, what were your friends asking you about culture, and tie that in with gun violence and gun culture?
Well, I have a bit of an interesting story. Like the first time I came, because we were staying in Universal City in LA, and we took the train actually to get to Hollywood Boulevard, which people say is really bad transport, but I thought it was okay, you know. Anyway, we got to Hollywood Boulevard and we come out onto the strip, and the first thing I see is the cops chasing a guy who stole a car, and he got out of the car and they had their guns drawn, and I'm like, I'm a tourist, mind you, and I'm going, is this a movie? Is this is this like someone like Arnold Schwarzenegger in a movie? Am I watching a movie set, or is
that's
this
America,
real?
man? That's America.
Yeah, I mean, that was like the first thing that
you
I
can
thought
see
of,
that
and I
anywhere.
Yeah, like I saw that.
Are you serious?
And I
That
saw
really happened?
Yeah, I saw it happening before my eyes. Like I was shocked, like because you know we see it on the TV, we see all the news reports, and obviously they're going to saturate it with America's going out of control because I mean we see it all the time on our news, but it's not like that everywhere in America all the time. It's not,
right.
But there is like if you compare cultures between ours and yours.
Wow.
I mean, we just don't see a lot of that, like, I mean, occasionally you might see it, but it's not as, in your face pervasive. I mean, I was surprised, like I'm going, what's going on? And, they're like, and the people that live there were like, oh, this, we're used to this. It was like, they would just put their hands up. They weren't even scared. I was going like to my friend, like, move out of the way, like where do we go to hide or what, and people are just walking past the cops, like not even thinking like there's danger. I'm thinking there's danger here because we're not used to this. But it's just an illustration of the difference in like the mentality, it's a bit shocking to us, the level of violence that happens in terms of schools in particular. Like, we don't have that. We might have some kid bring a knife to school and try and stab someone or something like that, or they try and punch someone, but we never have. I mean, I haven't heard of many. Maybe one time I heard of someone bought a gun, but like, that's rare. From what I've never heard of any other like mass shooting or like Columbine or stuff like that. So there's something that goes beyond just the gun control. It's to do with the mentality and the psychological basis of what's going on. Why is this happening? Can you equate it to poverty? Can you equate it to lack of support, mental support as well? There's so many factors that go into it.
What? Check this out. Check this out. So there's great segue. So high gun ownership in America. So United States, I'm just going to read some stuff here real quick, then I'll get out of your hair. But check this out. The United States has one of the highest rates of civilian gun ownership in the world. The presence of firearms is deeply ingrained, can be traced back to historical, social, and constitutional factors. The widespread availability of accessibility of guns, the likelihood of gun-related incidents, weak gun regulations, illegal firearm trafficking, socio poverty, unemployment, and the lack of quality education. I mean, tons of stuff. Gang violence, mental health issues, cultural factors such as the glorification of guns in the media, entertainment, historical narratives. I mean, there are all kinds of things that influence these attitudes towards firearm. I mean, literally, dude, I looked all this stuff up, and you could go on and on and on and on and on about how. And then on top of that, I'm going to get to this, and then I'm gonna be quiet here. But you've got the Oath Keepers, you've got the 3%ers, you've got the Proud Boys, you've got the Atomwaffen, which is a division of an extreme group that they're an online neo-Nazi community. So there's just tons of reasons why people need weapons for their own validation, for their own agendas, culturally, socially, economically, politically speaking. I mean, there you have it.
So I like in all of my kind of investigations about like gun violence and solutions, statistics through the week, because we have like a week between these podcasts where we get to like do a little bit of deep diving and stuff on our own. One of the most interesting things I did was I listened to an 8-hour. They did an 8-hour segment on WPFW 89.3 FM in Washington, D.C. about gun violence and some of the work that they've done throughout the decades. And these are like elder Black community-minded people. This is kind of a jazz and politically minded like radio station. And they talked to some of the community leaders who had helped reduce for about a 10-year period the gun violence in Washington, D.C. from the late 90s through the 2000s. And the reason I'll talk about how they did it, but first I'll talk about why it fell off. It fell off because they got defunded. Their money fell apart, and that means you couldn't have people like not paying bills to come and work and help their community and stuff. So that's I think key one is we've got to fund the crap out of these projects that are going to start to make a market difference for gun violence and stuff. But what they were talking about with why it mattered in DC, every area is different, but I think we have to think about like targeting different areas based on their needs. Washington, DC at that time had a huge youth-based crime rate. So they had these neighborhoods that they established were like routinely the calls that the police like had to go to over and over again. Just in a couple neighborhoods was like the vast majority of the calls, but they also narrowed it down to about 50 to I think 150 kids that were causing like 80% of the crime throughout the entire DC area, like stolen cars and armed robberies and all this good stuff. And what they did to change things was they got one guy was like, you know what, I'm gonna find the guys fresh in jail and get them out of jail, and the ones who have come out of jail, and get them to organize with the kids and talk to them about how we're going to change things. What are your problems? We're going to address them. What are your needs? Like, is your needs like emotional? Is it economical? How do we change the recidivism problem, like going in and out of jail? And getting them into community projects so that they're engaged with the community instead of like left to the devices of the friends who are helping them commit crimes and stuff. And so having that engagement actually reduced the crime statistically incredibly for 10 years. And then once you pulled their
You
funding,
mean violence or just crime in general?
Gun violence and crime in general. That's what they were saying. It was like gun violence, shootings. They're talking about like gang type stuff, but also like non-gang related victims would happen, of course, because there'd be like robberies and all that kind of like home invasions and stuff. So it actually made a huge difference when they engaged the kids of the community and tried to address their problems, but they needed money to do it, and they needed the community members to engage and be active. And one of the best comments I heard, one of the co-hosts there, I guess we'll throw it in links. We've got to remember to do that. Throw this link in there so people can listen to it. It's 8 hours long, but I promise it's a very good listen. She said that like one of her biggest issues with the Black community, and I think it's not just the Black community. I talked to you, Rodney, about this earlier. It's especially like the white community as well. It's all the communities. They stop once you put the dollar bills into the plate at church, and once like the babies are born, we like stop worrying about the bodies. We don't worry about whether they're hungry or they're angry or they're stressed out. We just kind of like we do our good deeds at church. We do our good deeds, and then we walk away and tend to our own lives and don't follow up. We don't engage. And she was saying like she was saying as a Black woman that she feels like the Black community in DC has failed at that level, to like they'll show up at church and have fun with the music and speaking in tongues and tithing and stuff, but once they're done with it, that's all they do. And I feel like that's universal. That's not just the Black community, and it's not just in DC. We need to engage our communities just universally. Yeah. So I feel like funding.
I mean, you can't.
Funding's an issue, and community engagement. Go ahead. That's it. That's all I was saying. Go ahead.
What's that, Julie?
It's not just American problem; it's also an Australian problem too. I think one of the biggest issues that we've had in Australia is some of the African immigrants, especially the youth, have actually created gangs, and there's been some gang violence. And I think the thing that people don't understand is the reason why some of them do, commit crimes and stuff like that is because of the racism that they face in getting a job, for one. Also coming from a country where there's a lot of trauma, generational trauma between tribal wars and things like that. Also, war in itself between countries. There's a lot of that trauma that's passed on, and there should be more support for that in working through those issues and that sort of thing. But yeah, racism is one of the biggest problems with the African youth here in terms of integrating, into society. And that's why they turn to crime, because, they're not getting the support that they need, and they're facing a lot of obstacles in the way. So I think, it's not a black and white problem. Right. You can't just sort of say one size fits all and this is going to fix the problem. Why don't they go out and get a job? Well, there's reasons why things are happening, because, they face a lot of obstacles in the way.
Well,
absolutely.
Probably more so than, someone with privilege, obviously. So, yeah, there needs to be a lot more engagement. Sorry, Rodney?
I would say this. No. I would say this, and if you're looking at, and I'm talking about specifically gun violence, as opposed to just racism in America. I mean, economically speaking, if you are my age, I'm 63, and you grew up in the 60s and the 70s, you saw a lot of stuff happening. You saw a lot of people, and I was lucky. I mean, I was extremely blessed that my dad was in the Army, my mom was an Army wife. I had a father and a mother in my life. I still do. You know what I mean? I grew up like that. The African American family, up until like 1965, 66, 67, was relatively intact until certain things happened politically, with the Southern strategy pouring guns and drugs into Black communities. That's what happened. Guns don't grow on trees, and neither do drugs. Okay, those guns, those Kalashnikovs, and those AR-15s and those Colt 45s didn't come from some manufacturer in Detroit. They weren't rolling them off the manufacturing lines like they were cars. So those guns were coming from someplace, and they were put into African American society or African American neighborhoods, Latino neighborhoods. There's a sitcom called Snowfall about the crack epidemic in Los Angeles, California, and the young man who basically set up the entire the entire deal, and how he fell in bed with certain entities from the United States government, and how they pushed into and all of these weapons into Black neighborhoods. So, no jobs, the ability to make money, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars a week without getting up and going to a 9 to 5, and then all of a sudden you're in a situation where it's dog eat dog. You're dealing with not only just the African American gangs slash, and you're dealing with the Latino gangs as well. So you've got this huge situation going on in LA. You've got this huge situation. I remember.
I'm curious whether you mean the LA gang cops or the LA gangs, because there's
no. I'm talking about people. No, dude, this isn't. Look, I'm talking about people who had the ability to deal with CIA, to fund a war that I was part of. It was guns, the Iran Contras. Okay,
right.
The way they made that war happen was by selling drugs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well established.
And not just LA, but well established. Okay. So not just LA, but dude, the crack epidemic in the 90s in Washington, from like, let's just say 87 to like 93, 94 in Washington, D.C. I knew a lot. I had at least 3 or 4 friends who smoked crack when I got out of the Marine Corps. Like mind-blowing stuff. Like I saw them go from 9 to 5 job, great place, great house, cars, to like living on the street. Okay. Saw that stuff happen. And the people who were bringing this into the country also brought not only just the drugs, but they have weaponry to manage the drugs and the people who were buying the drugs and the people, who were, let's just say, in rival gangs. You know what I mean? Yeah, gun violence.
You can blame the CIA for that too.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. I didn't want to say that word, those 3 letters, but but no, yeah, big time. Yeah, it's just that's what happened, guys. I mean, gun violence isn't something that just this blows my mind when people are like, "Oh, Chicago, black on black crime." Are you kidding? Wherever there's guns and there's white people living with white people and there's black people living with black people, you kill who you're around.
Okay, so let's get some stats in. You were mentioning Julie earlier before we kind of hit record on this whole thing. You were saying we want some stats. So whenever people mention black on black crime, that is a dog whistle, and here's why. I'm gonna jump in with some stats. So 80% of like this type of violence on Black people is by Black people, but here's the thing. 80% is
That's
also
not
white on white.
true. That's not
White.
true.
No, it is true. No, it is true, but
Yes, that is true.
it's also the opposite way, that it's 80% of white people is white people doing the same thing. So it's like the same on both sides. So you're not getting like more violence from Black people spread further into another sector. It's the exact same amount of people of white people. So why don't we say white on white crime? Why have you never heard the term white on white crime? Why is that never brought up? And it's because it's a racist trope.
It's media driven.
That's what it. Well, usually it's dog
Yeah.
whistles and comments on like Reddit or whatever. You know, it's like
Yeah.
it's just a dog whistle. So we need to get that out of the way. Yeah, yeah.
Terminology is everything. You know. Oh, hello.
What do you got?
Oh, sorry.
Dude, there were 24,000 suicides in 2019. There were 24,000 suicides that involved firearms. There were 14,400 firearm-related homicides in the United States in 2019. And let me hear, mass shootings in the United States. Well, we all know about that. Like we all know about that.
Yeah, we hear about that every day.
Okay, so
literally every day.
The Centers for, right. So the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, established that there were approximately 39,000 non-fatal fire-related injuries. 39,000, dude.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Remember, I said there were 25,601 murders in Texas from 2015 to now.
So again, like turns out I'm the only gun owner in this place, but I will admit that I know that owning a gun does increase the likelihood of me harming myself or a family member, and the risk of suicide increases greatly. So I would be remiss if I didn't mention that it is extremely dangerous to own a firearm, and it's only going to increase the likelihood that you only hurt yourself or somebody you love, and not to do the American dream of murdering somebody who's kicking in your front door, or whatever the dream is. And that does seem to be kind of the dream that we're sold.
A good guy with a gun. A good guy with a gun, man.
We talked about this last night. Like, there's the problem of like, who's the good guy? If you show up later into the mess and there's just people having a shootout, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? How do you tell the difference between?
Dude, what if you don't have a gun and you call the cops, show up, and you don't have a gun? Bam, you're dead. Well, you know, it's like the I always do this. It's like the David Chappelle skit where he goes, you know, the black guys driving the car. They stop. They're like, all right, get out of the car. They're like, you've been suspected of A, B, C, D, E, F. And he's like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. They're like, shut up. They hit him on the head, then they shoot him, and they sprinkle a little crack on him. They're like, all right, this is nothing to see here. Let's go. And that's man. You know, and there are people out there. Let's not get it. Look. Let's be real. The cops kill everybody, dude. They kill white people. They kill black people. If you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, you just might be sitting there and you could be shot. There's, and Pago, like you said, what was it about people who are non-threatening, but they're having a bad day? What are they called? The people. I'm not going to use the R word. I'm not going to use it.
Right.
Mentally
challenged, like going through some issues. Yeah, many different versions of having and you can one day have a mental trauma issue and recover and not have that issue forever.
And what happens, dude? How many people have been unalived? Go ahead, Julie. I'm sorry.
Do you want to see this? Sorry. Do you want to see the statistics for Australia's gun crime homicides?
Yes.
So the rate of gun homicide per 100,000 people. This will show. I don't know if you can see.
It's going down,
See how
down, down,
see how it's
down,
going
down.
way down, way down.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's the gun control laws have made such a significant difference, I think.
Dude, that's insane.
And the rate of gun suicide as well. You know, the interesting thing is, this is interesting because this is American statistics, but look at who has the highest rate of gun suicide in Alaska.
It's Alaska. Well, it's dark and cold and lonely.
Yeah, and there's all
Who
of
is it? Who
strange
is it?
people
Who
go
is it?
missing in Alaska. So
We love you,
Hold on.
Alaskans, if you're listening, but all two of you.
yeah. And
That's crazy.
highest gun ownership. Guess who's at the top of the list?
Texas.
No.
Texas.
Comparing countries, the red
Oh,
one.
America.
is
Of course, it's
United
America.
States. Yeah,
Of course,
it's
it's
United
America.
States.
By
The
a
United States is
large
red.
degree. We're number one. We're number one.
And
USA.
the highest. And this is from a study of from university. I think it's Sydney University. And this is another one study that was done of the highest gun crime, which is actually United States is 3.43 per 100. That rate of firearm homicide per 100,000 people.
Okay.
So they're a little bit down on the list. The highest one is actually Swaziland, I think. Swaziland. Then the Bahamas, and Guatemala.
Yeah.
So all the Latin American countries. Lesotho, Trinidad and Tobago, Brazil, Belize, Dominican Republic, Antigua, South Africa, Philippines, Ecuador, Mexico, Costa Rica, Paraguay, Uruguay, Thailand, and then the United States.
Okay.
So if you compare it to the rest of the world, that's the...
Where are we? We're the red ones? We're the red bar, is that right?
No, you're actually the sort of the green bar, the third from the right. Third from the right.
So what
right.
what number are we again? What number are we?
You probably, hang on,
Julie?
let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
And that's per capita.
20. You're 20th in the world of the highest gun homicide, rate of firearm homicide per 100,000 people. So you're
Per 100,000.
You don't have anything to worry about then.
So, yeah, right. Yeah, except they're children, usually, not adults.
I know. Australia's not even on that list. I don't see our name on there. So I'm quite proud of my country, you know.
No, that's great.
Down.
So this is where we need to go into a little bit of a talk about, I'm sure you guys love Rupert Murdoch down there, Julie. I'm sure you think very highly of him, right? This is one of your favorite guys.
I've actually got a personal story about a Murdoch. Actually, one of his nephews tried to chat me up one time, and I said, I don't want to have anything to do with you. and he couldn't believe that I didn't like him, you know, because he had some money. And I'm like, who are you? Like, I don't even know who you are. And so they've got a bit of ego issues, I think. Their grandmother was nice, but yeah, I'm not very fond of the Murdochs, you know. I think they're quite arrogant people, but that's just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
So
we went into in a previous podcast a little bit about the press and how the press has been kind of converted in America into a more extremist version of, like, in the 24-hour news cycle, when you get bored with when you have to fill in the spaces of 24 hours with your news, you start, like, if it bleeds, it leads is still a thing. So that creates a fear-based version of news. And it, you know, because it's like, if it bleeds, it leads, it's the most, like, scary kind of thing is what's going to show up the most often. And it does this, like, Rodney and I were talking earlier, it's like kind of this cyclical nature, this feedback loop where you pump in fear into people and you tell them that they need to arm themselves because there's people coming for them. And, like, you just showed the statistics that, like, you know, per 100,000 people, we're what, 29th? Is that what you said? Something like that?
Like, we're 20 something.
20 something. Yeah. I mean, it's not a super memorable number. So we're not like the worst, and yet you would, if you would ask a random person off the street who's not like well informed on statistics, they would say America is like definitely like the most deadly and dangerous. Like the gun shootings are happening everywhere. You yourself showed up and a gun was like waved around in front of you.
Yeah.
I've never seen a gun waved around during a crime in my life during like my waking day. It's never happened in front of me, but you
Dude,
showed up day one.
I have.
So
Okay, let me
you have you.
let me tell you a
I
story.
think slower in
I'm sitting on my
Oklahoma.
porch one night.
Life is a bit slower.
Check this
Maybe.
out. Check this out. I'm sitting on my porch. This has to be. I think like 20. No, I'm like 19. Sitting on my porch. This is like oh god, in the 80s. No, I'm sorry, in the 70s. Sitting on my porch. It's late at night. I'm just sitting there playing my guitar, like on a Friday night, Saturday night. This car rolls up, parks right outside the house, and our next door neighbor, I'm not going to mention her name, she gets out of the car, she opens the door, beer cans just fall out of the car, man. And I'm like, Susie, oops, sorry. Susie, what are you doing? She's like, and you could just see the fear in her eyes. Like she was like, oh my God, like, she's like, Rod, it's like basically, she didn't even say it, it was like, Rodney, save me. Save me. And I'm like, what's going on? Dude out of the car with a shotgun.
Oh God.
Walks up to the steps. Oh God, yeah. Yeah. So gets out of the car, walks over. And I'm sitting there like, dude, really? Really? He has a double barreled twin triggered shotgun.
Jesus.
One barrel off in the air. Yeah, dude. It just blam. And I hit him with my guitar. Bam. I didn't even break my guitar. Anyways, he goes, ah! And runs in the car, runs off. Anyways, dude, I've seen so much gun violence in my life. Like it's just not, in my like civilian life in the Marine Corps. Weapons are no joke, man. They're like, it's fun to go out on the range and fire them, but what they, you know what I mean? What they do to people. And if you don't respect those weapons, if you don't understand exactly what it is you're doing, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. You might not, shoot yourself or someone that but you never know what can happen with in a situation where it comes to you and your okay, or just being around people who have weapons. Like you said, remember when you said, Pego, when we were talking, like you said, violence, gun violence, and alcohol do not go together.
No. Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah. We all the time hear about like the people who like I would suspect a couple times a year I read reports, and I read a lot, so I'm a little overwhelmed with these kind of reports. Like I get too much information, but I like a couple times a year I hear about a cop who is off duty in a bar and shoots somebody as like just a civilian, acting as a civilian. And this is somebody who's supposed to be one of like the most highly trained professional. I mean, let's not go off on cops. Like that's another podcast. We'll do that at a later date. But like this is somebody who should know like aggression control and weapon like severity, like how serious that weapon is, and like that type of stuff. And they just like pull it. And so if a cop is like able to just like pull out their gun to solve a problem in the heat of the moment, think about what an untrained person who doesn't have all the time on the range or like trigger discipline or taking it seriously. And we're handing these things out like candy. Like we're just asking for some simple, like some intelligent background checks, like some red flag laws. And we're saying like the cat's out of the bag. There's more guns. What did we find out? Like there were more guns than cars by a large degree.
400 by 50%.
By 50%. So there's eight shit ton more guns than there are cars on the road.
437 million firearms in the nation and 280,000 cars. 280 million cars. 400 and was it 460 million weapons and 237 million automobiles on the road.
vehicles on the road.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna trust him on that. We looked it up last night. Me and him had a conversation about that last night. We can update those facts, but I would encourage
I
everybody to
mean,
look up these statistics.
those are the numbers, dude. I mean, look, if you've got 360 million people in your country, and you've got 100 million more firearms than you have people, there's something wrong, dude.
Yeah, well, my other point was like we're not gonna shove those cats back in the bag. Like, how do you collect? Like Australia, like had a hell of a time doing the buybacks, and can you imagine with our political heat right now, and not having the support of a conservative?
Never gonna happen.
The conservatives are not going to start this program to do gun buybacks and stuff.
Dude,
This is
they're
the
Democrats.
hill they're dying on.
Do you
You know
think?
what
Do you
it's
think?
based on, though? Most of it's based on profit and money. It's all about profit and money. That's what it's about. It's not really about gun control.
You know what it's about too. They're dim out there. Like, and listen, dude, you got to look at it this way. There are a lot of people who are liberal, progressive, far left, who are like, I know for a fact that these people who are libertarian, conservative, right wing, uber right wing, and white nationalists, they all have weapons. Okay, so you know what? If they have weapons, I'm going to have a weapon. I haven't bought one, but I probably will. I don't want to. I don't want. When I was married, my stepkids were like, Rodney, you were in the Marine Corps. Can you teach us how to shoot? I'm like, nope. They're like, what? I'm like, I'm like, we are not going to have weapons in this house. They're like, why not? Dude, are you kidding? One of you guys go out, you're 16, 17. This was what, 90 something? You guys go out and get drunk, 16, 17 years old, or get up or pissed off at one of your friends, come in here, get a gun and go out there. Nah, dog. That's not. And we lived out in the desert. Nah, bro. No. And this is when a lot of people, yeah, dude, no. It's dude, it's so crazy. It's so crazy. I am a total proponent of people having taking 6 months to get your weapon, like having to get. First of all, you've got to be trained. First of all, and you've got to pass your test, your training test. You've got to pass a written test, your training test, and then you've got to do a background check, and then you get your license. You do all of that before you get your license. If you can't pass a written test, and I mean like I want you to understand exactly what every nut and bolt on that weapon does. Okay?
Right.
I want you to know what happens. I want you to be able to assemble that weapon in a test. That's what I want you to do.
So yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's important that we make it so mundane and technical that we bore the shit out of people with this. If we're gonna do it, if as a nation, if we're gonna say guns are a part of our culture, I want you to be so bored with guns that making it part of your personality seems ridiculous and nerdy and overblown. Because there are too many people making it part of their personality. They are showing up to crowds and slinging it across them just to get a rise out of the crowds, and it's part of their personality. They're wearing shirts like "Come and take it," and they're putting flags up, and it's a joke to them. And there's no part of a gun that is a joke.
There was a guy standing outside on the other side of an elementary school here in Severn, and the kids were coming out watching. It's happened twice in the last week and a half where two men have been walking around Severn, Maryland with weapons. This is where I live, dude. With loft. You know what I'm saying? It's not a joke anymore. Driving down the street and, dude, like I said, Baltimore has had 333 murders, homicides by handguns last year. Mm-hmm. That's just basically one murder, one homicide by handgun a day. That's a murder every single day.
And Julie, how many were in your city in the last year, you think?
I haven't checked that statistic, but I'd be lucky to get statistics. Let me see. Gun crime in Australia. I'd be lucky to get any statistics, I think.
I'm guessing town hall has like a chalkboard where you just like 2, 3.
1, 2. No. I mean, I'm not saying there's no gun crime, but if you compare it to other countries, it's quite low. Gun crime.
It amazes me that we're only 20th. That we're 20th and we're not higher. It just amazes me.
Let me just look it up and see what we get.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just trying to find Australia. Total number of gun deaths. Let's have a look. I think there is a lot of crime related to domestic violence in Australia. That's quite high. I think there's a lot of people that are concerned about, the amount of domestic violence there is. Let's have a look. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And just on another point, I actually have had an experience with a shooting. Actually, surprisingly, I was working in a shopping centre. This is going back 20 years ago, so it's probably around the time that the new laws came in. It was fairly new, but I was in a shopping centre working in a store, and I heard this, sounded like the scaffolding coming down, like from a roof or something, like bang, bang, bang sort of sound. And I'm like, what is that? And I came out to the front of the shop to see what was going on, and I saw people running into another store, and I'm like, what's going on here? And then I heard bang, bang, bang again, and I was like, oh, that's a gunshot. Like, because I'd never heard a gunshot before that in my life, like in real life. So for me, it was, that's the mentality of Australians. Like, if you're not around it like all the time, or you're not used to it, you kind of figuring out, is that, what is that sound, And,
that's fascinating.
Yeah. And when I heard that, I freaked out, because obviously I was in the store by myself and I felt very vulnerable and I didn't know what was going on. And later on, I found out that there was a person who was robbing the movie ticket place, where the movies, where you go to the movies. And apparently he shot a security guard in the leg. No fatalities. What? And he threatened people as it was during broad daylight, during peak hour. I was surprised that he got away with it. But apparently he was going past people and threatening, you don't follow me because I'll shoot you. He had a mask on and everything. And he threatened a mother and a child and a few people, but no one was killed or hurt, apart from the security guard. He got shot in the leg. And I don't think they found him after that. I don't think they got him. And he got away with, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000 or something like that,
Oh my God.
So, but it was so brazen. Like, that's just, but to us, like to someone who's I never heard guns. I mean, even though my brother had a farm, he never had guns or anything like that. So, I never heard a gun before that, only on TV. So for me, it was like a split second. I'm trying to figure out what the sound was, because at first it sounded like the roof was caving in. You know how the sound on tin, when bang, bang, or something's banging something or falling down. But then, I kind of recognize when I see people running, you kind of know pretty fast that, you pay attention to the people that are running, it's something really serious. So, yeah that was a bit traumatic.
I remember one time I was sitting in my room, and I was in college. I was going back to school, and I had this flat in College Park, and all I heard was like gunfire going off in DC. This was like just before I moved to LA. I was going back to school, taking some master's courses, and you could hear the pop, 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 and I'm just like, it was like 91, I think it was 91, and you're just like, dude, really? Like, it was bad news. And then I moved to Los Angeles in 1992, and saw that whole fiasco, that whole like train wreck, the Rodney King riots, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and all the weaponry that was, and on top of, oh, dude, here's a great example of just crazy. So, sitting in my office in at the Dick Clark Building in Burbank, California. This is going to blow your mind. Okay. Do you remember the Bank of America bank robbery with the two Russians who had Kevlar on from their ankles all the way up to their
No.
Dude, yeah, okay. So these two guys robbed a bank in broad daylight in Burbank, California. I think it was 1994. They go in, they both have AKs, okay? And they're just spraying the place, dude. Like they walk out, they rob the bank, they're just spraying the place. The cops can't even touch them. The police are shooting them, and the bullets are just bouncing off them because they've got Kevlar all over their body, all right? So what do the police do? This is America, dude. This is like the Wild West. They go to pawn shops and they buy weaponry and they buy armor-piercing bullets, dude. Because
they go to the corner store. They go to the corner store.
Yeah. And buy, dude. You know what I mean? And what the way they put these guys down was with headshots.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just it's look, man. I mean, okay, we might be 20th in the world, but no one does it like we do, man. No one. I mean, when we do it, yeah. No, I'm not saying yay. I'm just saying it's
no, I know.
It's just awful. It's just the fact that we even have to deal with it. You know, I mean, think about it, dude. If you're in a situation and you're I'll give you another example. I'm walking down, and this isn't so much a gun, but I'm walking downtown San Diego. Homeless guy's like coming towards me. He's pissed off, like he's upset. He takes his flip-flop and kicks it off his foot and misses my head by this much, dude. And I'm like, dude, I'm gonna kill this guy. And everyone looks at me and they're like, no, don't touch him. That's the America we live in. I mean, the America we live in is not just touched by gun violence, but like you said, Julie, like the high rate of domestic violence that you guys have, we have the same thing in America. Violence in America, albeit, is definitely our one main issue now. But violence in America, just violence in America, is off the charts, and it always has been. And as Diego will tell you, it's always been an issue intertwined with race. So systematic or just upfront and just in your face racism, and get around it because that's how we started off. You had a bunch of guys, our founding fathers, who said, yeah, man, we're enlightened, but we're actually really enlightened. We're going to write this. We're going to write the Constitution. We're going to write the Declaration, but we're also going to own slaves. And that's how we started. That's how
it took firepower to start the nation in that way. Like let's talk about, just briefly, I'm just going to mention that George Washington wasn't rich, like filthy rich when he came over. He became filthy rich by taking a lot of Native American land and selling it. He was a realtor. He was basically Donald Trump. I'm going to get so much hate mail sent my way. Send that to Rodney. Anybody's hate mail about George Washington, send that to Rodney. George Washington. George Washington became filthy rich by taking a lot of originally native land and selling it and keeping some for himself, and became quite the businessman. Kind of the first OG Donald Trump. So it took weaponry, it took firepower to gain that footing, to secure it. and to push forward and to get more of it. And that's one of the real reasons America still has today this like love of guns, because it is intertwined with white supremacy, with taking over land that isn't yours for by taking things by force. That's really what it is. It probably doesn't matter what color the people were here that live here that they took the land from, just that they wanted it. So they had the
Well,
firepower, they had the technology, the numbers, and they sustained that. I say they. It's, you know, I'm half white, I'm half Native American. I belong to this country as well. I have some guilt in my past as well, but like at least I acknowledge it, and I'm trying to change things by helping other people get informed and understand like what we need to change. You have to know your past in order to change your future. At least we can understand that the origin of this started off with firepower, with aggressive firepower, and we have a gun culture today because of that past, and we're continuing it for to prop up some of those same type of mentalities. But like everything else, Rodney, you and I talk about this all the time. There are unintended consequences for every action. Uh, Everything we do, you do a big action, it comes back to bite you in the ass later down the line. That's going to happen with guns. Putting so many guns in the country, like just having them wandering around. The second we have our next downturn, economically speaking, which could happen very soon with our what's it called, a default, the default that might be coming soon. It is said that this could possibly lead to the next recession. So if you get another downturn that's massive and you have economic problems, people do resort to violence in order to feed themselves, to take advantage of situations. If there are too many guns out there, so many that it's easy enough to break into a car and find one underneath the seat, or break into a home and take a couple that are not so secured. You're going to have more gun crime out there because of the plethora of access, the plethora of guns out there.
it's going to be
So
a hot summer, dude. It's going to be a hot summer.
unintended consequences is what we're going to run into eventually.
We're going to run
I
into more than
say
that.
something?
What's up, Julie?
I wanted to show you something. Rodney was talking about the bulletproof vest. Is that
Yeah.
what he's talking about before? One of our outlaws was very creative back in the 1800s. I don't know if you ever heard of our Ned Kelly. Have you ever heard of him?
This
No,
isn't the guy
outlaw?
who took like the metal plate and put it on his chest.
I'll show you a photo.
Yeah.
Hang on. This is
Oh.
the get-up that he made in order to evade
Wow.
the bullets and it was quite effective. The only problem was he didn't put it on his legs, and so that's what they aimed for, was his legs. So they eventually got him in the end. So he was creative, because it would, he was covered
The vital organs are covered. Yeah.
Yeah, but he couldn't
That's what
run
those
away
guys
very
did.
far because it was heavy.
That's what they did. That's what those guys did in Burbank, California. It was Kevlar. I mean, it was like, and they, yeah, it's.
I was going to mention, like, as light as like Kevlar is, if they had tried that in the summer in Oklahoma or in Texas, they would have dehydrated to death before they got out of the bank. They would have just collapsed.
It could have been in December. It could have been in December. But no, I'll say this.
Imagine the knights of the Round Table, with all that armor,
Yeah, right.
And their heavy swords.
No, but I mean, oh, dude, you could have put rounds right through that stuff. Yeah, arrows. Yeah, but the type of like, and this is something Pago. Think about all the buffaloes that were killed to starve the Indians, to starve the indigenous people.
Right.
You talk about firepower. There's a photo, and I don't know if you've ever seen it before, but there's a guy standing he's standing there, and there's a photo of him standing next to at least 2 stories of buffalo skulls.
Yeah, we've mentioned it. We mentioned it on our podcast. Yeah.
So when you talk about firepower and how people have taken how Europeans came over here and took the land and lands of not just Americans, but other cultures in indigenous cultures in on this continent, Canada, America, Central America, and South America. I mean, that's what they did. They went in there. They shot everything up. The war, like I said, the war between the British and the Spanish was the war and it was what the War of Great Britain was a war that said, the British beat the Armada, and from that point on, just by sheer will, they sailed around the world and used those cannons against everyone.
Yeah,
and that's what they did. It's so they did it here. They did it in. Go ahead.
You had a really interesting factoid that I think we should again, to reuse the word remiss. We would be remiss if we didn't bring it up. The Chinese researching and finding gunpowder.
Oh yeah. Well, so the Chinese monks found they invented gunpowder. The Chinese invented gunpowder, and the reason they invented it because they thought it was an elixir. They thought it to be an elixir for long life. And and remember what you said when you said the things that we do that we think are good always come back to bite us in the butt.
Yep. Yep. And unintended consequences. Yep.
Dude, I mean, it's really weird, man, because I mean, if you look at it, Australia and the United States are the same thing. I mean, all the people that came here weren't the best. You know what I mean? And the people that came to Australia, they on both continents, they were convicts, and but they had one thing that the indigenous people didn't have, and that's they had muskets, man. They had firepower, and they show up and they're like, well, hey, Running Feather, whose land is this? It's everyone's land. Really? You mean no one owns this land? Well, no one. Everyone owns. No one owns this land. We all own it. Really? And there you have it, man. And they just took advantage of the spirituality with things that they knew they could take advantage of them with, and that is fire.
Couple fence posts and a couple guns, and boom.
And so, what did they bought Manhattan for a couple necklaces or something like that?
We'll have to fact check that, but I know there were some big trades, but I think it might not have just been like one like wampum belt full of beads. I think there was like a slightly larger exchange, but yeah,
but
very small amount of like money and exchanges, misunderstandings for what was being done is how land was lost for Native Americans and taken by the Europeans that became the glorified leaders of America.
White man speak with forked tongue. Remember that one?
Yeah, and then they also at the same time called us Indian givers.
Oh my God!
Wait, what was that, Julie? What was that?
Insulting term.
Yeah, you think?
Oh my God, dude. I can't believe you just said that, dude. You can't. I can't say that.
I definitely can't say it.
No, I'm not trying to say that. No,
I wouldn't recommend it. No.
That's not a good idea. That's so
again,
wrong, dude.
All the mail directed towards Rodney.
Yeah. Again, people love hate mail.
Rodney will take the heat.
No, I'm not taking the heat. I didn't come up with this idea. Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, send it all to me, and then I'll whatever. I don't know. Yeah,
I'm curious about Julie's like we haven't heard enough from you, Julie. I want to know what you think. I mean, you saw a gun in America, and you saw like a robbery there in Australia, and you have heard shots and stuff. But like, can you just give me your overall sense of like how what do you feel about America's future with guns? How do you feel personally about guns? Like, would you ever shoot one? Would you ever like be interested in using that tool? Or
The only time that I'd be comfortable with guns is if I'm going into the American wilderness,
okay,
because we don't have mountain lions, we don't have bears, we don't have coyotes, we don't have all these things that I'm a bit concerned about. That'd be the only time I'd probably be with someone who has a gun, but I wouldn't be comfortable handling it because it's not something. I'm a non-violent person. I mean, I will use martial arts if I need to because I'm trained in that. But to defend myself, obviously. But in America, it's a bit hard because everyone's got a gun, so I'm going to be running very fast. But
and a brown bear is probably not going to respond well to your jujitsu or.
no.
No.
And I've made a joke with Rodney. Unless I've got a Bigfoot friend that I make friends with Bigfoot, to defend me, maybe that might be helpful. But I'm personally, like, guns for me, it's something that's so foreign to me that I don't know that I'd be comfortable with it. I just think a lot of things that are going on in America is definitely profit driven. Everything is profit driven to the point of saturation, and people are losing their souls, really. And seeing what I've seen in the entertainment industry, it's pervasive in every industry, and it doesn't matter what country you're in now. It's starting to kind of, the tentacles are starting to traveling to other countries and affect mentalities, and I just don't like the way it's happening. And I feel sorry for the indigenous people of many countries, because they're fighting for their rights. They're fighting to like the Amazon people, they're still fighting the loggers from coming in and ruining their environment. They shouldn't even be mixing with those people. Just leave them alone. They want to live the way they want to live, and that way of life is slowly dying. And it pains me to see that, and people are being killed in the Amazon. The indigenous are being murdered by loggers and people like that. So, I've heard stories, and I just think that's really a travesty, because, indigenous, probably out of all of the peoples in the world, have the most wisdom, I feel, and they know how to navigate taking care of the earth, and, taking care of people, and, community driven. And that way of life is being stamped out, by profit-driven greed and mentality of that sort of way. I mean, I don't have anything against being wealthy, but how you use it and how you treat others and how you, respect others, that's what's important, I feel. But not everyone thinks that way, unfortunately. And, we kind of worship celebrities on the top of the pedestal, but they're just like anyone else. The only thing is they're part of the same system, unfortunately, and it affects everyone. And I feel sad, that the world's going that way. But there's not a total loss of hope, because there are many of us out here that are still working towards a better future for all. So, whether you do that under the radar or whether you do that openly, it's up to each person, I think, as a responsibility to our fellow man to, do the best that we can, I guess. That's my own personal philosophy.
that was amazing. Yeah, no, I think that's beautiful. That was the most concise and beautiful statement that I think we've had throughout the evening. Thank you. I appreciate that. I wish that we had more of the Australian perspective here in America on those things, especially as an indigenous person who wishes people didn't take it as like a mystical joke that we're in touch with the land, or just outright denied it. Like, there's some mythology behind that, but there's a lot of reality to how we managed things a little bit better than how it's being managed today. And a lot of it is through force. And if we would just kind of meet in the middle, we'd still be a lot better off than the way we're doing things today. So
I agree with that. Yeah. I mean, my daughter's got some Inca in her as well. She's half Peruvian, so she's got some Inca and Spanish. So she's very much in touch with that tradition. She sages the house, which is quite a common thing for her. She meditates, and she needs to probably connect more, I think, to that side, because unfortunately her father, is kind of doesn't promote that side of himself, I think, because of internalized racism to a degree. So it's unfortunate that he doesn't really acknowledge that side. But
what about his mother? What about his mother? You remember you were telling me about his mom, about her being light and being like having
his mother actually does look like she's a mix of Spanish and Inca in her. But she's kind of, I don't know, she just doesn't. It's weird though. She doesn't like Australians either, because all her sons have married Australian girls, and she doesn't like Australians either, which is kind of weird. But she's also got this, the darker you are, the worse it is. There's that, that South American mentality that, the darker you are, it's a bad thing,
That comes from colonization. That comes from hundreds of years of Spanish colonization. That's where that comes from.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just really a shame because, Indigenous people have got a lot to be proud of. They're amazing people. I mean, I've met so many. I mean, I know a Cherokee that lives here in Australia, and one time I met. Yeah, they do live here. There's quite a few, actually. There's a few Native Americans that live here in Australia. They like the energy of Australian land. I don't know how different it is, but, I spent hours in his teepee just talking about everything, spiritually and everything. And I think that comes from my early experience of almost drowning when I was very little, and sort of having an awakening at a very early age, I guess, that there's more to me than just my flesh and bone. There's much more 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, 5th-dimensional, and I really respect a lot of the beliefs of Indigenous people. Like I really understand where they're coming from, and I kind of have an affinity. I feel comfortable, in different people from different cultures with their beliefs. I've been brought up with Buddhists a lot. Like I was in a community of Asian people, and a lot of them were Buddhists, and I used to spend hours of my free time at school when I would be sitting with them and talking to them about spiritual stuff all day and their beliefs. And I found out that I very much align with their spiritual beliefs. So that's why I got along more with people of different cultures than I did of my own, because I couldn't understand the racist mentalities that some people have. I've had some racists in my family too, and I've never dated. I've always dated outside of my own culture, so to speak. So I find it a challenge for me, and it's good because it helps me grow as a person, I feel. So, and I don't think you should limit yourself either, to the people you mix with, because I think it's important as a person. You have a responsibility, to connect to the wider community, and, try and help people where you can, and I mean, I'm not a big CEO or anything, but I do what I can, for others, and in my small way, So I do the best. That's all you can.
Man, I would really love to have you on more of these podcasts, because I really enjoy that perspective. And again, getting that mix of like, I'm Native, he's a black guy, and you're on the other side of the world.
Dude, so this is how Julie and I met. I was like, I was gonna go to Australia. I'm like, I need an Australian girlfriend. And Julie's like, dude, I don't need a boyfriend. Let's just be friends. And I'm like, all right. So how long's it been, man? 5-6
God,
years now.
it's probably been longer than that.
Longer
maybe.
than that. Yeah, we've known each other a while, man. Had a ton of conversations. Really good. Like, I gotta get down there. I gotta see this for myself. I gotta see Australia for myself, dude. I really do.
Yeah, find a
mean,
Cherokee teepee for me. Take a photo. I want to see.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got an interesting anecdote. I actually have got a connection to Native Americans, but it's in my past of my grandfather. My grandfather was from Bristol in England, and he came out here in 1915 on the SS Wakul. I actually know the actual boat, and I was looking through his like photo album, and he was a avid photographer. He was also like a painter as well and a graphic designer. So he was very talented creatively. And I was looking through, and one time I saw this Native American teepees in his album. And I'm thinking, how did Native American teepees end up in my grandfather's album? Like, I don't think he went to America, from what
Right.
I know. And I'm like, I'm trying to figure this out. So I was doing some research, and I found out that Wild Bill Hickok actually traveled Europe
Okay.
and had,
Yeah, that's
had
true.
Yep.
yeah, and he traveled Europe and London and all those things. So I'm thinking maybe my grandfather came across Wild Bill Hickok, and I actually was getting a one of those eyeglass things, to look closer, and I saw like the Native American with the headdress and the ipi, and it was just so fascinating to me, and that's what started my interest in Native American culture in particular.
Wow. That's
And it's
crazy.
just interesting. Yeah, like I have those connections. It's just really interesting, and like when I met the Cherokee friend of mine, we spent hours just talking about different stuff. And, because I have a strong interest in the paranormal and, because of my own experiences. And, I'm wanting to do my own podcast on paranormal in Australia because we have the Australian version of Bigfoot, which is called Yowie by the Indigenous.
Cool.
So, it's everywhere. And I've heard a lot of things from Native American lore, some things that people won't talk to me about, which is understandable because, of fear. But, I'm really interested in many of the legends and, stories that are, and particularly in America, there's a lot going on in the paranormal world at the moment, particularly in Alaska. Alaska seems to be a hot spot for a lot of things. Yeah.
Hey, bring it on here. Bring it on here. Bring your podcast.
Test it out. Yeah. Dip your toes in the water.
I could definitely spend hours talking about paranormal subjects because I do a lot of research on it.
We're here.
We can do that as our next one.
A lot of people have told me stories about things, and I have a theory about the extraterrestrials and why the government's coming out now and saying that they're real.
Save it. Hold on. No. Don't say anymore. No.
Well, she can tease a little bit. She can tease a little bit.
No. We need to do this. Dude, you need to come on here and you need to do a 2-hour podcast. You don't understand, bro. She will do a 2-hour podcast on the paranormal.
No, I believe it, and I'm excited about it.
I would. I would. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack, and a lot of people say to me, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but I'm going to tell you, if I could get a dime for every time I heard someone say that to me, I would be very rich because people have told me their stories, and I don't judge. I don't judge people because, in this world, there's a lot of things we don't understand, that it's beyond the 3D, and unless you're, a trained shaman or someone that deals with that all the time, you have more of an understanding. But, Western society is so it's like the blinkers are on, and when you actually go out and actually do the work, the spiritual work, and expand your senses and your mind, there's a lot more to the world than what we see in front of us. And that's a problem with humans, is we're such a warring species, and we're not actually developing at a rate that we should be spiritually, mentally, emotionally. We're still that, what we don't know and we don't understand, we war against, and we've got to expand that thinking beyond that, because it's getting to a point where, things are changing, physically in the world, and, we've got to keep up with it.
I think that's a great point. One that I hope that we touch on in the paranormal podcast, where we talk about how our technology progress has far outpaced our spiritual growth. As a Native American, that's hugely interesting to me as well. I think it should be interesting to everybody who kind of feels like this maybe hollow core of your humanity, or at least you sense a hollow core in humanity as a whole. And you're saying like, we're so good at producing things, plastic things and metal things and technologically like advanced things, but we're not so great at advancing our spirituality. When's the last time you've heard about a revelation, a re-burgeoning, a regrowth in our spiritual like findings or developments? You don't hear about them very often. We had some in like the 60s and the 70s, right? And it was kind of laughed off. Like we think of it now as like kind of hokey and silly, and your mom just had a fun time having orgies in a field, and that's basically as much as we think about it.
You know what else? You know what else it comes down to? I mean, so your time moves really slow. That's the thing that I guess we don't understand, or we do understand, but and because we're in that I want it yesterday mentality. We went from buggies to rocket ships in less than 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even what? Let's just say we landed on the moon in 1969. In 1869, the Civil War was just over. Yeah.
How do you think that we so rapidly got to the moon? Why do you think that is? Think about it.
Oh, there are tons of reasons why. There are tons of reasons. I mean, some people say we didn't even go. You know what I mean? Yeah. Some people say it's a farce, but Pago doesn't think so. Neither do I. But
I think some reverse engineering technology has been acquired.
Dude, she.
Do you really? You think so?
Yeah, dude. I'm telling you, this is not. Hold on. Listen.
I'm on the side just to like. Hold on, I gotta set my foot down. I'm on the side of human beings like advanced technology, and we're smart enough to do it. But I'm open to listening to everybody's ideas.
Pago was like. So we were talking. I'm like, dude, my friend from Australia is gonna come on the show, and he's like, well, if she can keep up. I'm like, bro.
I didn't say keep up. No.
What did you say? Whatever it was you said. But I'm like, and I was like,
I think my thing was like, can she do an hour and a half? Like, do you? And you
know what I said?
Can I do an hour and a half?
I'm like, dude, this is what I said to him. I went, bro. I'm like, you don't even understand.
Yeah.
I'm like,
I see it now.
Yeah, dude, you have no idea. She and I have had 6-hour conversations, like 6 hours of just like, bro, no, you don't understand. No, you don't understand. Dude. Like, yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, Julie is
I'm
one
like
of those
Mulder.
People. Yeah.
You're what?
I'm like Fox Mulder.
Got it.
Yeah.
When that show came out, that was like, oh my God, I so relate to him. Like
your spirit animal.
Yeah, it's like, oh my God, I found my soulmate.
What was his sidekick's name? What was her name? What was her
Scully.
name?
Scully, the skeptic. Yeah.
Dude, everyone needs a skeptic at least.
Everyone needs a Scully, dude.
See, but that's okay. So my early years, and I've got some ghost stories that I can tell you where I experienced some stuff from my earlier years. So I am equal parts. I've got my early years is Fox, and then my later years are Scully. So I'm like a bisected human being where I've got both living inside of me. I'm yin and I'm yang. I've got some crazy ghost stories, but I have to like, in my older years, go skeptical and go like, was that my brain misfiring? Was I going through some weird stuff? And like, there's lots to talk about. One of my experiences had to do with like seeing a ghost at the foot of my bed, and now I think that it was what's old hag syndrome, which is where you're like half awake and half asleep, and it's a misfiring of the brain. It's kind of like a dream, and you're kind of awake at the same time. So I'm going through the Fox Mulder and the Scully thing at the same time in my life now, and I'm super curious to hear your stories and to get mine out as well. I am thrilled that we will get an opportunity to talk instead of like about like white supremacy and civil war and violence, maybe about some more fun and scary stuff like big ass hairy upright apes wandering through forests.
Look, one of my favorite channels, one of my favorite all-time channels that I listen to, because there's a lot of storytelling channels out at the moment, and that's one thing I want to do as well. But because I love narrating stories, but this one channel called Beyond Creepy is like one of my favorite channels, and he just finds the most obscure, strange stories reported, a lot of extraterrestrial ones, there's some cryptid ones, but very fascinating stories. And it's just interesting, and there's little things you learn along the way, bits and pieces. I mean, some of the stories may just be stories, but some of them has you thinking, and usually the ones that you feel are true are the most strangest of all.
I think you two should do a podcast together.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you two, I'm serious. I think you two should do a podcast, and then I could just do, because I'm just listening to you two. Dude, this is
You'd be a happy listener.
yeah, dude. Yeah, because
Come on, Ronnie, you've had some experiences being in the Marines. There must be
I have. I've had a ton.
Weird experiences you've had.
I've had a ton outside of the Marine Corps. I lived in the high desert in California, and you'd see
Mojave?
stuff in the Mojave Desert.
Yeah,
like
I've
Big
heard
Bear,
about Mojave Desert.
Big Bear, my house, desert.
Yeah,
desert. And you would be sitting on the porch at night, and you just see something go, and then stop, and go, and you're just like, nah, dude, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
And then you get up, walk in the house, and like put your covers over your head. No, really, I mean, or you would just the desert, the universe. Like when Hellbot came through, remember when we would just sit there and watch that thing just.
Do you have your new sneakers and your shroud on and your bunk beds, or?
Yeah, all of that, dude. All of that. It was crazy. Yeah.
Any missing time?
The poison and oh my god, huh?
That was LA, right? I think it was LA suburb.
No. It was San Diego, dude.
Oh, it was San Diego?
It was San Diego. It was San Diego. It was right up there. And, oh god, I can't remember. Anyways, but it was in San Diego.
Are you familiar with the story, Julie? Do you know what we're talking about? There was a cult of young people mostly who thought that aliens were like trailing the Hale-Bopp comet, and they were gonna pull people up. Okay.
Yeah, that's a bit too much.
Yeah,
little far.
Yeah.
No, but
I think. Yeah.
No, in the Marine Corps, a lot of stuff went on. A lot of crazy stuff went on that you don't see on. They're just things that you just don't see on a regular basis. Just natural stuff. Like it's probably 95 degrees outside, and you're in the Panamanian jungle, and you're lying there because it's been 100 degrees, 100% humidity in the jungle all day, and it's the rainy season, and then it starts to rain, and it's 95 degrees outside, right? It starts to rain so hard, it's like it's waterboarding you, and you start to get hypothermic, like you're like that. I mean, that happened probably half a dozen times. the world and just the natural stuff that happens is incredible. I mean, dude, the Panama jungle is dude. If you want to be scared to death, go visit that jungle. I'm telling you. No, I'm telling you. We would be so there. Okay, so let me tell you what happened. So we get there. I think I told you this. We get there. The buses show up. The buses have bullet holes in them. We get on the buses. We squeeze through the locks. We get up to Fort Sherman. Once we get up to Fort Sherman, we acclimate for about 3 days, and then it's on and cracking. So, we get on the truck. The 6x or the 4x takes us to literally this door in the jungle. Like you could see the canopy, but there's just like this dark. You walk into this entrance in the jungle, and it's like being on an alien ship, dude, or being. You have something called black palm. So black palm has stickers that are that long, razor sharp. You're in a jungle. It's 100 degrees, 100% humidity in October, the rainy season. You've got your jungle camis on, but you've got them down. You've got everything rolled down. You've got on leather gloves, okay, and you notice that to the right of you there's a crevice. It's probably about 250 to 300 foot drop, right? And you can't make. And I had the PRC 77 with a small whip. I was the comm guy, right? So I had the radio on my back. So not only did I have my weapon, my Alice pack with all my stuff in it, and in my camo in my pouches, I had 25 pound on top of my Alice pack. So day number 3, I think it was, after we realized that we weren't going to drink. We were drinking water out of the river. We were putting iodine tablets in the river. Dude, I'm surprised I'm still here. But we put iodine tablets in the muddy water, which is what we drank because that's all we could drink. We're going down this hill, and George, my buddy George, he's running down the hill, and his eyes are like, and he yells, "Bees, killer bees." Like jungle bees. And we're like running down the hill. I trip, and I'm like tumbling. Like, dude, it's like in the movie where you see the guy rolling down the hill.
Mm-hmm.
That was me, all the way into the river. Bam! And you're just like, but I had a bag on the radio. So yeah, the jungle is. I mean, I could tell you, I've got 2 or 3 hours worth of stories about that place. It's just,
you didn't see Predator,
anything.
Did you?
No, thank God. But I mean,
Predator, the film.
No, like if I'd have seen the 3-prong thing on my head, that would have been it. But the Okinawan jungle, like I've been in the jungle in Okinawa, nothing close, man. Like being in the Marine Corps, there's a ton of stuff, dude. I could talk to you for weeks. I could talk to you for at least days in a row about the Marine Corps. Easy. It was the scariest I've ever had in my life, and the worst time. Some of them to me were absolutely terrifying. Like saturating your pants with piss, terrifying. I mean, it was bad, man. So yeah. Dude, it was pretty bad. It's pretty bad. So yeah, I mean, but paranormal stuff, I mean,
I'm taking a note of that just in case I go on any expeditions. Go to the bathroom.
No. Just I mean, it's paranormal stuff. I've had my share. I mean, I've seen ghosts. I've seen a couple in my life, and it's crazy how that works. And you wake up the next morning like, I didn't see that. Like you said, like I didn't see that. But yeah, you saw it because it was standing right outside, right out I was in my bedroom. Anyways, yeah. I was about 15 or 16, 2 years before my next door neighbor Butchie had died. And that's who I saw standing right outside.
Wow.
Yeah, dude.
Jeez.
Yeah, man. Crazy, bro. It looked just like him. And he just disappeared.
See, I feel like we all three need to be on. I mean, Julie, I am more than happy to do a podcast or 2 or 5 with you, but yeah, I think Rodney's got some stories to tell too. Like
yeah.
Well, then you guys can be on my podcast then.
Yeah.
When I set it up. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
That sounds like an official invite.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I've got a few people now that I can have as guests as well.
Do you think we could get Marvin on here?
I don't know if he has any stories himself.
No, from a musical. So tell him about what you do with the radio station.
Well, I started off. I met Marvin online, and we were talking about music because my daughter's also a musician and actress and model, and we'd been to America to actually do an intensive acting course. And yeah, she got scouted by a few agencies, their acting agencies. They wanted to sign her straight away, but unfortunately, she has to have more of a body of work here before she can get the visa. So that's still in the works. But coming back, I was friending a lot of people online in the industry, just to make sure she's protected and I get a broad perspective of people. And so it ends up I met Marvin online, and he said that he has a independent music station, and I was telling him, I know a few artists that might be interested in coming on board. What do you think of this artist? What do you think of that? And he's like, you've got a knack for this. So it kind of snowballed from there, and then I've procured a few artists, and yeah, and that the rest is history. So yeah, and so now I'm kind of moving into a space of wanting to do my own podcast and, my own sort of interest area, which is paranormal, obviously, and spirituality. And, I have a sort of a in-depth experience when I was younger in it. So, yeah, it's something I would love to pursue a bit more and find out more and try and understand more about what's happening.
That's
especially
amazing.
now.
I don't think that I've ever heard of music to paranormal, like top new artists to paranormal podcast, like fusing the two together. So that, I mean, I'm not saying that you do every episode mixing the two, but what a delightful background you're coming from, to be from like a music industry thing to also be interested in paranormal.
Well, you think, a lot of people in the creative arts industry are very sensitive. I mean, they're using, what is it, left brain, or it's left brain, using your, which is the more intuitive side, I think, from what I understand. So, and I'm also a qualified hypnotherapist as well. So I'm thinking about doing some stuff in the spiritual area with that. But it's like, I come from a very broad kind of perspective. I've worked in many different industries, so I have a lot of experience with different people from different cultures, backgrounds, and experience, and all the way from top CEOs to people who are the garbos, whatever and everything in between. So everyone's experience is unique and interesting, and in terms of the paranormal, I come from my own experience, having almost drowned twice in my life. So I don't have a good situation with water, but the second time was a bit more profound. But yeah, it's affected me and how I've evolved in terms of my spiritual side. And I have a very universal outlook. I'm not kind of indoctrinated in one particular area. I think all areas are relevant, and it all goes to the same source eventually. And that's why there's so much division, because people think, oh, well, mine is the only way and the true way, but my way is the other. I don't believe in that at all. I think every person has their unique experience. It's individual to each person, and it all comes to the same source. That's my own personal belief. Some people don't believe that, but I don't judge. I try not to judge.
Right.
The only thing I don't stand for is when people hurt other people, or go against those spiritual rules, murdering or stuff like that. So
there are. I want to piggyback on something you just said. Yeah, there are 4,000 different religions in the world.
Wow.
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you have a name for your podcast yet, so that other people can like look for it? Or
well, I'm just in the process of getting it up and running, so I'm doing the business plan to it at the moment, and definitely I will let you guys know when I'm up and running, and then we can kind of piggyback off each other if you want to.
Ping pong back and forth.
Use Yardstream. That's what we use. Yardstream.
We like it. We like it a lot. Speaking of, we're gonna end this here in a minute because it's 2 hours and 5 minutes long. But whenever we cut this off, we gotta. We're going to end the cast, but we're going to talk further. And eventually we're going to do maybe some patron or extra stuff where people get to listen to more stuff. But Rodney and I are both going to do, and I think Julie's invited, right, to do some smaller segments if we want to just like chat.
Julie, if you want to go on here anytime, I'll put you in. You're a co-host right now, so you can get on Yardstream and come on here and do a podcast anytime you want.
Yeah, when we're sleeping, you can be like, I'm in control. I'll say whatever I want. It's gonna be crazy.
Here's the thing. You can create your own podcast on this platform that you're on right now. You don't even have to go. Yeah, so you're already on the platform. You can call it your. Yeah, create whatever you want.
Whenever we do this, whenever we sign off, and thank you for anybody who's listened to 2 hours and 6 minutes so far of this. We really appreciate you making it all the way to the end. Usually when we log off, we just end the recording, and Julie, you hang out, so we'll chat and do kind of a debriefing or just kind of a relax kind of thing. So don't hang up on us. But for all of you American Micro podcast listeners, oh Matt, thank you so much. I mean, we are so grateful.
Peace, love, and happiness,
thanks for
please subscribe. Please subscribe. Just subscribe.
Subscribe. Hate mail goes to Rodney. Welcome, Julie. Thank you, Julie, for being the new voice on the podcast. We really appreciate you.
I'm the token Aussie.
Just remember,
you're
what? The token Aussie.
Just remember, all the hate mail goes to Pago.
You spell Pago RODNEY.
No, you spell Pago. Anthony Pago. That's how you spell it. I don't care. Just
all right.
Send it.
We love you guys. Thanks for listening to Militia to Gun Violence. We will apparently be doing some paranormal stuff soon. Thank you guys. Peace. We love you. Have a good night.
Bye.